Gilded Age. Well, you see, here's the thing about the Gilded Age. Most history teachers, when they teach history, they go, I think I'm just going to skip the Gilded Age. Don't skip the Gilded Age. The Gilded Age is super important because it really talks about this idea of money disparity, economic classes. It really starts establishing the norms that we're eventually going to need in our society that will come out of the progressive era after the Gilded Age. Because remember, everything is connected. Nothing is separated from each other. The Gilded Age creates a society that is in need for some changes that the progressive era is going to do, which we're going to get to, guess what, next. So, the Gilded Age. What is it? Why is it called this? I want you to imagine 4,000 families. 4,000 families that have more wealth than 11.6 million families combined. When I put this on the board, you're going to be like, what? That is 1% of our population back then owned more wealth than 99% of the population combined beneath them. That disparity in economic fluidity, economic strength, economic ability is going to cause a lot of problems. You're going to have some people that are living large, eating off the hog, and you're going to have other people that are barely scraping by. And because of this, will lead into progressive era ideology, which we're going to get to in about a unit or two. So let's talk about the things to know about the Gilded Age. See, the Gilded Age refers to a metal. Like, the outside looks real shiny, right? That's the 40,000 or 4,000 people, the 1% that has all the wealth. But the inside is just, ugh. And that's the fact that we have inside our country, although it looks really shiny on the outside, these people that have a lot of money, they have a lot of money. The majority of the people, the majority of this piece of metal is not looking like that. It looks bad. It looks like it can't hold up. That is the Gilded Age. It's a society that looks good on the outside, but when you start looking on the inside, there's some problem, folks. And here's the things we're going to talk about, because the Gilded Age, we are going to spend a lot of time talking about that 4,000 people, the 1% that kind of built this country the way we see it today, because there is some good with the bad. The good news is the country does kind of develop into a modern nation. The bad news is it does it on the backs of a lot of people barely scraping by. Now let's talk about the people you need to know. These are the people that kind of structurize the modern world. One, Cornelius Vanderbilt. Remember railroads. Cornelius Vanderbilt, railroads. Cornelius Vanderbilt, railroads, because he's all about the railroads. He's a railroad connoisseur. Railroads, they connect east to west. They connect businesses. They connect people. They allow transportation. They allow people to migrate. Big deal. John D. Rockefeller, oil, oil, oil. Johnny Rockefeller, oil. Johnny Rockefeller, oil. Remember those two together. This will end up being the kerosene lamps that light up the homes and allow people to work longer hours. You have one and only Andrew Carnegie, or Carnegie is actually how you pronounce it, Carnegie. I'll probably say both because I grew up with Carnegie, so I'll keep saying Carnegie, but Carnegie is how you pronounce it. He is the steel connoisseur. Our population kept growing out this way, but we couldn't grow out any further, so we needed to build up, and that's where steel is going to come in. This steel manufacturing is going to allow populations to boom in the cities. It develops the modern landscape of the big populations, big cities that we have today. J.P. Morgan, bank connoisseur. J.P. Morgan, bank. J.P. Morgan, bank. J.P. Morgan, bank. Bank, 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 but bank, bank, but bank. This guy made some money. He made so much money, he almost bailed out the country. Okay? And then the president at the time was like, I don't want to look bad, so I'm not going to take your money. But he could bail out the country. He's that kind of a guy. Then we have to talk about Ford. All these different things, including the next two people, contribute to the Ford manufacturing of the automobile. That's like the last on the list. Let's get to two gentlemen that, oh boy, fisticuffs. We have Thomas Edison, right? Inventor of the light bulb. And then we have Nikola Tesla, also kind of important with electricity. So you have two different types of powers. Tesla, remember DC Tesla, and then oh no, don't do that. Erase everything from your brain. Nikola Tesla, AC, alternating current. That's Tesla. Direct current, that's Thomas Edison. Now this is important though. Thomas Edison, direct current. You got to remember that, because these two different types of electrical power will do two different things as far as safety. And I'm going to tell you exactly how these currents work in class. So that's kind of like the run list of everyone we're going to talk about in this video. Peace. Man of industry. The first person that we're going to talk about in the Gilded Age is the only Cornelius Vanderbilt. Cornelius Vanderbilt, first of all, what a name. This is a guy that took one ship. He bought one ferry. That's it, one ferry. He turns it into the largest shipping industry that our country's seen in that time. Then he turns his attention to railroads, because railroads are the big new thing, right? And railroads are the thing that get people transported, things transported, and he starts investing in railroads. Now, railroads, you could actually basically bet on. You could buy stocks in railroads, and then based on the number of traffic that you would have on those railroads, you would gain more money based on the traffic. Basically, you're betting on the fact that people are going to use these railroads, right? So what he does, because he's this type of guy, he wants to show his power. He wants to show his muscles, right? So what he does is he shuts down one railroad that goes into New York, right, into Manhattan. He shuts it down right away. Now, he's going to lose money off of this. But what's going to happen is people are going to take the shares, the stocks for these other railroads that link into this, and they're going to start selling them. Why? Because if you shut down the one rail line that goes into New York, all those other feeder rail lines can't make money. People are going to stop using them. So people are afraid. I'm going to get stuck with these stocks. They're going to be worthless. I got to sell these. So they start selling them as much as they can. And guess who buys them up? Cornelius Vanderbilt. He starts buying all these stocks, cheap prices. Give me them all. And he ends up getting just a ton of them. He has a monopoly now in the stocks of railroads. He owns the railroad business in this country because of this. But then he looks around and he goes, this isn't going to stay the same. He does try to buy one more railroad line, the Erie. The Erie goes from Chicago to New York, two of the greatest cities at the time, linking them together. People tried to fool him. You see, what they did was they started printing off stocks. Just a bunch of these little shares. They started printing them off like they're just nothing, right? So here's the problem with that. When you print off a bunch of stocks, you water down, you water down the amount of worth each one of those stocks were, and how much more you have to buy in order to actually own the company. This guy goes into millions of dollars in today's money buying these stocks basically that are watered down and worthless. And man, Cornelius Vanderbilt is upset. So what he does is he starts changing the way he looks at railroads. One, he thinks they're overbuilt. There's too many railroads. The money's not there. It's in what the railroads carry. So instead of worrying about buying railroad stocks or investing in railroads themselves, he starts investing in what the railroads carry, specifically kerosene. Well, oil, which will turn into kerosene, which we'll get to later. And he looks to a bright young man, John D. Rockefeller, and he goes, hey, man, I got the money, you got the looks, let's make something happen. So he turns to John D. Rockefeller, and we'll pick it up from there next time. About John D. Rockefeller. So first things first, his upbringing. His dad is a con man, okay? He goes to town to try to con people out of their money with these non-actual things that will actually help. He's basically going door to door saying, I got this magical elixir that'll make everything great. He's a snake oil salesman. They used to call people snake oil salesmen, where basically they're selling things that don't actually do what they say they're going to do, and then the guy just leaves town, and that's what he does. Eventually, Dad leaves, and he's kind of on his own. John D. Rockefeller. John D. Rockefeller actually sells candy on the side to make money for his family. Eventually, he goes out and starts his own business, and he's going to go into the oil capturing and refining business. And he gets this call to meet Cornelius Vanderbilt, the guy we talked about last video, last section, that he's going to try to ship oil on his trains, on Cornelius Vanderbilt's trains. So he actually misses the train to go meet Cornelius Vanderbilt. And the train that John D. Rockefeller was supposed to be on crashes. He would have died. And he makes him a very religious man. Eventually, he makes a deal with Cornelius Vanderbilt. He actually tells Cornelius Vanderbilt, hey, I'm going to make 60 barrels of oil a day, and he actually has no way of doing this. Now, here's the trick. Oil back then, they would basically stick stuff in the ground, and basically they would try to pressurize the oil to make it shoot out. And you lose a ton of oil this way. And he finds a way to make it so you don't lose as much oil, but this is the important part, refining. Crude oil is like what comes out of the ground. That by itself is relatively useless to everybody. What you have to do is you have to refine the oil. You have to take this mixture of just stuff and then separate it into its individual parts that we can use. Specifically, separate kerosene out of it. Now, you're going to talk about this eventually in science class, and these are properties, okay, characteristic properties. And one is density. You worked with density before. Every item, every atom on the periodic table of elements has its own density. And you can determine what element that you're dealing with based on its density. But it's not the only thing that you can determine. Boiling point is a characteristic property. Freezing point is a characteristic property. So what you can do is, if you have a mixture of liquids, and I'm going to show this in class, but if you have a mixture of liquids and you want to separate it, all you need to do is boil it at different temperatures. Certain of these liquids are going to boil out at different temperatures. And when you get to the thing that you need, you can separate it, specifically kerosene, and eventually gasoline, which we'll talk about later. So long of short of it is John D. Rockefeller has found a way to take all of this crude oil, okay, and then separate it based on boiling point, refine it to get the kerosene out and get the best kerosene that you can get. And he starts producing this stuff like crazy. So much, in fact, he actually has more oil to ship than Cornelius Vanderbilt can actually handle. So he turns to another group of people, Andrew Carnegie and actually his mentor, a guy named Scott. These two are met by John D. Rockefeller, and they turn to Cornelius Vanderbilt and say, hey, this John D. Rockefeller guy, he's trying to make a deal with me. Cornelius Vanderbilt's like, hey, how about this? We'll work together and make John D. Rockefeller a name that never really matters. We're going to make it so he can't ship his oil, right? So they work together to push John D. Rockefeller out. Bad move. John D. Rockefeller develops a new way of transporting oil. I'm not going to use trains. I'm going to use something called a pipeline. Pipelines are these giant tubes, which, by the way, I'll show pictures of. Giant tubes that will carry oil from one location to another without the use of trains. It bypasses Cornelius Vanderbilt's monopoly and Andrew Carnegie, who's, a protege of a guy named Scott. Eventually, because of the less oil being shipped on these trains, it actually causes a depression because the stocks for these trains go down, and it causes a depression, and the entire country feels it based on these two fighting each other. Eventually, during the Depression, Cornelius Vanderbilt dies. He's an old guy. He croaks. And it leaves Andrew Carnegie versus John D. Rockefeller, and we'll pick it up from there. Battle, right? Andrew Carnegie versus the one and only John D. Rockefeller. And this actually, the problem is you have these rich guys, remember, only 1%, 4,000 families versus 11.6 million, only 1% that are doing things against each other that actually affect everybody else, because you had a depression because of the John D. Rockefeller versus Cornelius Vanderbilt. Now you're going to have some riots. You see, what John D. Rockefeller does to Andrew Carnegie is he shuts down a refinery in Pittsburgh. Why does he do this? It's not to make him money. It's so Andrew Carnegie loses money with one of his factories in there. Factory workers lose their jobs. With factory workers losing jobs, riots take place in Pittsburgh because people can't feed their families. And this has to do with two guys that are just, I want to be rich, and I want to be rich, and bam, 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 and then everybody else kind of deals with the aftermath. Andrew Carnegie wants to start making a name for himself. He wants to put his name out there. He wants to be one of those big boys, right? The big dogs. So he sees the Mississippi, and he sees an opportunity. If I can build a bridge over the Mississippi that can hold a rail line, or just a good bridge over the Mississippi, we're going to make some business because you're linking basically east and west with over this bridge. The problem is, building a bridge over the Mississippi, it takes something stronger than what they have right now. They have iron. Iron will break across that length of a river. And you also have to have a bridge high enough that the ships can actually go underneath too. So you need something strong that can go far and strong that can go high. And the only thing they have, steel. The problem is, steel is typically only used in like small items like forks and knives because it's super expensive to make. In order to make steel, you have to take iron, and then you have to take some heat, and you smash it to basically produce carbon. You got yourself some steel. But no one's made a new way, a fast way, an efficient way of making this stuff until Andrew Carnegie does. And he finds a way to efficiently make steel, right? Carbon, 2,000 degrees temperature, steel, smashing together, boom, iron, carbon, 2,000 degrees, smashing together, boom, you got yourself some steel. He finds a way to do this fast and easy. And he builds himself a steel bridge that goes across the Mississippi. People don't believe it's going to work. They've seen bridges crash and crumble over this thing, so this is not going to work. So Andrew Carnegie, he comes up with a way to make it look like this bridge is the most amazing thing. He gets an elephant because there's this old superstition that an elephant will never walk on something that's not stable. And he gets this elephant to walk across the bridge. And they take pictures of the thing and put it in papers. And people are like, oh man, did you see that elephant? It totally walked across the bridge. And people are like, man, this steel thing is pretty awesome. And they start asking for more steel. And he starts making factories for this stuff. More and more and more steel. And he starts becoming super popular. So popular, in fact, he needs an enforcer. He needs somebody that he can use to whip all of his factories into shape to make more steel for less money, right? He turns to a guy named Henry Frick. We're going to pick it up from there, folks. Andrew Carnegie. And he revolutionizes the way to make steel. And he stops like investing in railroads and stuff. What he invests in is buildings. Buildings in cities. And basically cities start to boom because of this, because we can build up and not out. Which is awesome. Populations go up, which means jobs go up in cities, and productivity overall goes up. There's some other issues that come along with this, but we'll talk about it later. So he makes a lot of money. And remember, he's like his big rival, John D. Rockefeller. These two were basically just enemies, like pure enemies. But you know what? It's good to have competition because one was competing against the other. They were trying to become better because of that. Competition's a good thing. Anyway, they used to send Christmas presents to each other. John D. Rockefeller used to send this paper vest, which was basically a symbol of a poor man, as a Christmas gift. And Carnegie goes, okay, and he sends a bottle of fine whiskey to John D. Rockefeller. Now, the reason why this is funny is because John D. Rockefeller does not drink alcohol. Matter of fact, part of his religion states that he shouldn't drink alcohol. So sending him a bottle of whiskey was just like I see you, man. All right, so they're going at it. And Andrew Carnegie starts making more and more money, and he needs to hire like some muscle, someone to like help him run his business to make sure he can get the most productivity. Here comes Henry Frick. Henry Frick is the opposite of Andrew Carnegie. Henry Frick is stern, tough, trying to make a name for himself in the wrong ways, and willing to just get the job done by any means necessary. And he starts doing some horrible things. He starts making the hours that the people work and the wages that they work low, hours high, risk high, people working 12-hour days, 6 days a week in the most dangerous factories in the world, and they're getting paid very little wages. Eventually this leads to strikes, and what Henry Frick does is he eventually, hires a militia. Yeah, he hires a militia to basically get rid of the strikes. And then you have a bunch of people that are on strike without guns, and you have the militia with guns, and the scenario is not good. Basically, some rocks are thrown, some things happen, militia starts firing, 9 people end up dead. Bad news. Bad publicity, by the way. Speaking of publicity, Henry Frick also built his own little country club. He built it outside of a place called Johnstown. And Johnstown was this nice little town, but there was a dam right outside the town. Well, to build his clubhouse, his little sports house, Henry Frick decides to weaken the dam. Well, this is bad news bears for a bunch of people in that town. You see, when you weaken the dam, and there was this giant rainstorm that came in, a lot of water in the dam started to overpressure the actual dam itself because it was weakened, and it burst. It destroys the town. It kills 2,000 people, 1,600 homes are destroyed. He ends up going to court, Henry Frick. Nothing happens to him. With all this said, his reputation is pretty bad, and eventually someone takes notice of it. A person goes up to try to kill Henry Frick. They shoot him, stab him. He still lives. The dude, Henry Frick, is a beast. He gets stabbed a couple times, but he fights back, and he survives. Eventually, Andrew Carnegie is like, I'm done with this guy. He served his purpose. He made me a lot of money, but he's making me look bad. So he fires them, and then they start to conflict after this. Oh, Henry Frick. When we get back, we're talking about some money. J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan. Why is he important? Because, man, this guy had some money, and he knew how to invest. So he was about investing in companies, basically making his money work for him to make money. And he invested in a guy called Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison with the light bulb and electricity and all this stuff. Because he sees a vision. J.P. Morgan sees that the days of kerosene lamps are out. They're dangerous, and it's time for something new. So he's going with electricity with Thomas Edison. And also Nikola Tesla, which we'll talk about in a minute. So he invests in this. By the way, his dad, J.P. Morgan's dad, thought this was a stupid idea. It was like a carnival trick. Wow, was his dad wrong? But you know what? Sometimes people are just wrong. So he invests in Thomas Edison, and he ends up making an enemy, John D. Rockefeller. See, John Rockefeller, he was all about, kerosene lamps. Why? Because that's what he shipped was oil, kerosene. So he wanted to make sure electricity looked bad, because if people start lighting up their houses with electricity, there goes his business. So he is in this situation where he has to try to make this look bad, and started as like a smear campaign. Think of it like politics. You know how politics is going on right now, where you see a commercial where one person just bad talks the other person but doesn't say what they want to do. That's kind of what happened back then, where you have John D. Rockefeller just sending stuff in the papers about how electricity will kill you. So will kerosene, depending on how you use it. But they start going against each other. And but it doesn't really matter, because eventually electricity is going to win out. You kind of know the end of that story. We don't have kerosene lamps in the schools. So he ends up winning out eventually. He ends up building power grids throughout cities, which makes him tons of money, J.P. Morgan. He ends up becoming super rich, so rich, in fact, he actually bails out the government because of a depression, a 2-year depression. He saves the country just with his bankroll. So, man, he's had some power. Now, let's talk about the people he invested in. So, J.P. Morgan. First, he buys Edison's company and calls it General Electric. So, that idea of General Electric, which you actually find stuff that is called that today, he buys this company, changes the name to General Electric, and that's his company. Well, anyway, Thomas Edison had a protege, Nikola Tesla. Thomas Edison was about direct current, which I'll talk about in class how this works, and Nikola Tesla was alternating current. Now, there are differences to this, by the way, and I'll explain this in class. Direct current is basically anything that you have batteries on. So you have batteries in your remote control for your TV, that's direct current. Alternating current is anything you plug into a wall. And there's a reason for this. Alternating current is actually safer for installation in walls than direct current. So Nikola Tesla eventually, was like, hey, what about this alternating current? And Thomas Edison's like, yeah, you're an idiot. I don't care about your alternating current. Direct current is the way to go. And Nikola Tesla eventually just leaves. He's like, I'm done being your protege. I'll do my own thing. He starts doing experiments with alternating current. And then they start to fight. They were once friends. Now they're going to fight. Not physically, but through the papers and through basically trying to make the other person look bad. And what Thomas Edison does to try to scare Nikola Tesla is he starts like saying that the alternating current kills people, and it's not really a good thing. There's this situation where he starts killing animals with alternating current, and then they make an electric chair to scare people away from alternating current, and it's a botched execution. The dude slowly fries. It's this terrible situation where you have Thomas Edison literally making the electric chair to scare people away from alternating current, and then they brutally kill a guy, regardless if that was the sentence or not. Torturing was not part of that sentence. They slowly kill a guy using alternating current. It's rough stuff, man. So they start battling it out. Eventually, Thomas Edison really wins that battle, but we use more alternating current today than direct current. So maybe Nikola Tesla won the battle. When we get back, what I'm going to talk about is how all these things come together. You have oil from John D. Rockefeller. You have the infrastructure and steel from Andrew Carnegie, and you have electricity coming from Thomas Edison / Nikola Tesla. And it comes to build one machine that literally is the major machine of our lives. Electricity. We have steel, we have oil, which we can turn into gasoline through fractional distillation, which is a fancy word, but basically using boiling point to separate the different component parts of crude oil into kerosene, gasoline, all the things that we can use today. Gasoline, by the way, was a byproduct that people thought was a waste. They would just throw gasoline away. They thought it was too combustible, which it's pretty combustible. But Ford, and as well as the people that develop cars, they're like, you know what? Maybe we could use this as a form of, source of fuel, which we use in our cars literally every day. So Ford wants to come up with a new type of car. So he doesn't invent the car, but what he invents is the Model T. Now, this car is specifically important to know because this car is going to make it cheaper for people to buy, and it's easier to assemble. So one of the things that Ford does in his factories, when he eventually gets a factory, is he uses the assembly line. This makes production go extremely fast because you have Johnny here doing the same thing over and over again, and it goes to the next person. Did it? Next person. Did it? Next person. Did it? Next person's going, and then it just keeps going down the line. It makes you produce more stuff faster than having someone build an entire car by themselves, which will take them days. And this assembly line really reinvents the way we do business and the way we do just general factory work after this. Well, let's get back to before he can start making cars. You see, he has to actually get public support on his side. And there's this group called Alum or something like that basically controls how cars are being made back in the day. And he's trying to get the public support on his side. So what he does is he takes his Model T and he gets in a car race with the car of the day. And he wins. And this car race gets published in papers. People are like, man, this Model T is awesome. It goes fast. So this pushes people to go, okay, let's take this guy seriously. Eventually, he gets people in his factories. He starts building the Model T. And the big thing that he does is you have this big argument back then about paying your workers a fair wage. His goal was to make sure he paid his workers enough money that they had enough left over to buy one of his products, to buy one of his cars. The idea was my employees are going to have enough wealth to buy the thing that they make. And that actually reinvents everything because you got to think about this. A lot of people didn't have cars. This is going to have an opportunity that more and more people can have cars because it's easier, it's cheaper, it's more accessible. And the assembly line is going to produce a lot more of them. It really changes the roads that we live on. And this was the Gilded Age. You know, this is what gives us the modern stuff that we have today, if you think about it. The higher populations in the cities that make more production, the assembly line that makes things produce faster, the fact that we have electricity flowing through our buildings, heating our houses. It reinvents how people live. But it comes at a cost. Like I said, 1% own more than 99%, and that is going to cause problems, and it did cause problems. While some people were busy sending Christmas gifts as a gag or as an insult, others weren't having Christmas, or they weren't having food to eat. So it's one of those things where it's a give and take, and it's going to cause some issues that leads to the progressive era, which we're going to talk about in about 1 or 2 more units. Peace, my friends, out.